Call somebody up.
Okay, I want to thank Scott for covering for me last week. Couldn't make that. And I want to welcome Transfer Department to our meeting today. I want to appreciate what you've done in terms of preparing a very nice package. Very explanatory and comprehensive. And I think that's really nice. It was to work with. Thank you.
Didn't think it was that good.
Well, we'll get to that.
I know.
It was a good try.
Yes, the letters, the numbers, not so much.
Okay, what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, it's pretty self-explanatory that the operating budget itself is very straightforward. Few issues here. What I'd like to do for that part is to ask the members of the see if they have any questions specifically, so you don't have to just read everything you put in there. Is that okay with you? As we go through this, are there any questions that people came up with in terms of the operating budget stuff?
I just had a question. It seems like a lot of the increase is due to increased cost of materials. Are you also doing more than you thought you would do this year than last year? So it's not just increasing materials, but you've actually expanded what you are doing?
The biggest bomb in my current budget was the equipment maintenance line. That was not only due to increase in cost of services, mechanical services, increasing cost of products. It was just a horrible year. Anything that could have broke. So we're in a situation now where we're trying to nurse trucks along that should have been traded a couple of years ago. And we're paying that price. So unfortunately, I have to get these trucks through another winter while waiting for their replacements, which have, I think, been on order since last March. I won't get one until probably March or April to replace one of my ailing ones. In the meantime, I need to keep it on. And just a lot of things like that.
Are the trucks covered when they're being stored for all those months?
Well, a lot of them are kept inside.
Okay, because you mentioned a couple of times, well, it's not used for a few months and it's
Yeah,
almost like that was the cause of rust.
Yeah, there's one in particular. It's not one of the newer trucks, but it's a 2013. And the driver of that truck was a part-timer. He only basically worked in the winter. So basically in the spring, the truck was rinsed out and parked in the corner, and nobody else drove it because everybody else has got their own ride that they're used to riding in. So when they set, they seized up, and it was finally caught up with that one this year. The brakes across the rear, I mean, everything, every brake component across the rear was seized up.
So does it make sense to start it and run it, or does it really not?
It makes sense to rotate it, and that's what I'm trying to do now.
Okay.
Previous to now, it just sat on. So this year we know the damages that had been done, trying to stick it in the rotation.
And that's the one that you're pursuing the clean diesel grant program for, right? Or 2015?
Nope, that was, this one we're talking about is 2015.
Yeah.
The one I'm doing the clean diesel program for was 2004.
2004, excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I do have a question on the postage line. You mentioned that you're sending notices on the invasive species. And I guess that's the knotweed.
Mhm.
Can you describe what it is when you have to send a notice to residents? Just because you're working the knotweed on the street, or they're having rotten on their property, or what is that process?
Well, basically, our right of way butts their property. So I don't think it's a state requirement.
It is not a requirement.
We do it as a courtesy
Okay.
to try to respect people's property. Some people go for it, some hostily oppose us doing anything with chemicals.
All right, so there are
Abutting their
toxic
property.
chemicals then that you have to use.
Yeah, it's not.
It's a glyphosate.
Yeah.
So Roundup.
Yeah, it's a Roundup derivative.
Yeah.
So the select board, when the select board first evaluated the proposed mitigation of using the glyphosate to control the knotweed, the select board held a public hearing, and it was the select board who said, we want to send letters to everybody that's in an affected area to inform them, share the DES documentation of, best practice mitigation programs, share details of what's going to be done and how, share the license details of the applicator selected. So that facilitates a lot of conversations in advance, because what we don't want is Paul Eaton showing up to spray the knotweed and the homeowner coming up for the first time when he's all suited up and spraying. And so that it isn't required. It's something that we've done. And I think it's been very productive because it allows us to have conversations ahead of time.
Yeah.
Gives us a chance to connect with residents, answer the questions or concerns that they have.
And some of the
But it
people,
costs money.
some of the people that were initially turned off by getting the letter, once either me or the applicator talks to them and kind of tells them what's going on, they kind of soften up and allow us to do it.
Now, when a resident has knotweed on their property, do we have any responsibility for that?
No, we have a concern with it. We don't have a responsibility with it. The concern is eventually it's gonna grow back out in the road again. But it'll take a while, but it'll get there.
I had my property leveled when I came in and there was knotweed there. And I had to dig it up and just throw it, get down, get all those yellow roots out of there and then pour.
Yep.
Rub down on top of it. That's pretty nasty stuff.
It is.
The benefit of a commercial application of a chemical like Roundup is, one, every application is specifically permitted with the state. Not only is the applicator licensed, but I think what Paul Eaton described when we had the public hearing is that he's calculating on a site-by-site basis the amount of chemical that will be metabolized through the application. So he's not over applying. And the residential use of Roundup, the big problem is it's over applied, it's not metabolized, it runs off and it causes the problems. And so it's the same chemical, but it's a different approach is what was described in the public hearing.
I mean, a lot of the people panic prematurely because they don't know the application process. When we send them the letter, we tell them that we're gonna treat the knotweed, they've got in mind of a $10,000 tank truck with shower heads on the side of it, just going down the center of the road. And so you kind of gotta tell them, no, this is not what happens.
And this was not a real good year for doing any kind of weed killing on that with all the rain that we had.
But his application was very effective this year.
Yep.
Yep. And in conjunction with the roadside mowing schedule. And so it's not just, that's not the only mitigation strategy that we have, but it's part of a bigger plan, so.
Now, do you have a similar program for gypsy moths or anything like that?
Yeah.
I've got another question. We need one. In the paving one. Your last sentence, you mentioned there are other funding sources. Can you go into some detail what those might be and how we might get them?
So it would be the two that are probably left at this point would be there's some SB 401 money. And the remainder would come from the
Transportation fee.
transportation fee capital.
You're getting good at this, Mark.
Yeah.
You're getting good at this. SB 401, 2 budget cycles ago, the legislature identified a need for additional highway and bridge money for municipalities. And so they made, as a budget line item of the state budget, an additional appropriation above and beyond the highway block grant that we receive every year. And so because of the way that they did it, it allowed us to accept and spend that money as extra money. Highway block grant just goes in as offsetting revenue, but this SB 401 money set up basically separate non-lapsing accounts and allowed us to spend that for specific road and bridge projects. So we've been spending that down with the select board authorization. Fortunately, during this last budget cycle, they appropriated additional funds, a smaller portion than they did the first time. So we'll be getting that additional cash on hand soon. So those are that's what SB 401 means.
Okay, so now I understand in order to do the work, we have to have it allocated within this budget. Does that then offset some of this, or is it in addition to what you're budgeting here?
In addition.
It's in addition to.
And the benefit of it as a non-lapsing funding source is that when we're looking at projects and we talk about that additional 100,000 this year, we're asking for 150,000 as a separate.
That's not SB 401.
Nope, that's a separate local
Well, that
appropriation.
I
Correct.
understand,
Yep.
because we're approving that.
Yeah,
ourselves.
what I was gonna say is that SB 401 money serves in a similar purpose because it allows us to look at our paving scope, spend all of the operating budget money. And then if we have projects that it would be nice to cross off towards the end of the year, now that we know how much we were able to accomplish. And maybe there's a section of town, hey, let's finish that. We've done that year over year, add a few roads at the end of the year with those funding sources, whether it be the transportation fee, capital reserve, the non-lapsing account that voters have consistently approved. It's a dynamic situation. That's why I said Mark's getting good at it. This is, he's got enough years under his belt that he can follow the dollars with the different funding sources.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
So what happened with the old Settlers Road Bridge non-lapsing? That was proposed for last year. We didn't put it in, right? It wasn't an actual warrant article.
It wasn't proposed for last year,
Somebody proposed, for this year.
this year.
Ah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't think, did I see, I guess that like mailing it in, was that in one of the warrant articles here?
There probably isn't a separate warrant article form for that.
Okay.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
the trouble. Yep.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Have we completely used up the 2-year fund, $100,000?
From 2 years ago, yes, the one that would lapse this year,
What's left in the one from last year?
the one that would lapse next year.
Yeah, that one will be gone,
This year?
yes.
Oh, because we added
Yeah.
the,
I think in a couple of weeks it'll be gone, once we pay the bill.
And are there any constraints on the transportation fee?
No.
I see it's $350,000.
right.
And
Some of that is
take some of this
encumbered.
out?
Some of that is encumbered for projects that have yet to start construction. So we have committed some of those funds to install the first portion of the drainage pipe on Malago into that new conservation subdivision. 190,000 was the number on that. We're making that up.
About that, yeah.
So some of that is encumbered. There isn't that much available.
But it's like 350,000, isn't it?
Yeah, so figure 200 for that. And then the other big portion of the money that the select board previously identified that as the funding source was off Toll End, the gravel road,
Oh, Orchard Hill.
Orchard Hill, which we're still waiting for.
Waiting for the engineering to come through, it's getting closer.
But we're paying for the engineering out of that account also. Maybe what it would be helpful to get a more specific answer is, and Mark has this in various forms, but to consolidate the various funding sources, the available balances, and how much has been kind of promised or committed to this point.
Yeah, because that's something we don't know from the.
Yep, I
information.
understand that. I understand that. So Mark, we work on that. Okay. Did you have other questions?
Nope, no, it's those two things, because again, I'm looking at increases in the warrant article and other things. I'm saying, well, we've got all this money, why aren't we
Mhm.
using some of that?
I know this group especially likes to talk about revenue. One of the things that, and I'm not bringing this up because I necessarily support it, but the transportation fee capital reserve is basically an additional fee. When you register a motor vehicle, you pay $5 extra. It's a local option and it goes into that capital reserve for transportation related activities. The state increased a number of years ago the allowed maximum for that transportation fee to $10. And so as an alternative to maybe additional operating budget appropriations, we could propose to voters increase that transportation fee to $10 and use that as a funding source. So the people that are registering cars and using the roads are the ones that, so for conversation's sake. I guess you probably wouldn't, it wouldn't probably be prudent to reduce the operating budget for the same year you propose that to voters. Because if they don't approve it, then you don't have any operating budget or the transportation fee have reserve, so it probably have to be staggered.
That ties in with my next question. Where are you talking about more roads being taken over in terms of the town's responsibility? And you have 3 more in the pipeline. And with the increased growth of population, it looks like there are potentially a lot more that the town either will or needs to or must, I'm not sure what the rules are, assume responsibility for maintaining. And so this is so, from my perspective, sort of ambiguous as to what it really means. Is it possible to know what roads those are, what the potential ramifications to our maintenance load are, so that we can see as we project out the future, is this really significant, or is it something we should be able to handle with the budget process that we have on? That's the question I'm trying to get to with that data.
And that's such a tough one. Mark and I are smiling at each other because we talked about it a lot. You know, the way we approach, and we talked about this in the last budget committee meeting, is we take steps, right? So we might add 2.5 miles of road maintenance before we come to the town and say we need an extra truck and driver. That doesn't mean that we didn't have growing needs through that time, but we just stretch the existing resources thinner during that time.
It's gotten to the point where, you know, if we inherit another subdivision, we just can't say, we'll tack it on Joe's route. Inherit another one, well, we tack it on Sam's route. It's fast approaching the point where we can't do that. And a good part of the problem is not so much the time that it takes to do the actual route with the traffic, it's the time it takes to get there.
I understand that. So are these primarily then new subdivisions where they're
Yeah.
putting new roads in place and not assuming responsibility for existing roads that get converted and upgraded?
Right, these would be new subdivisions.
They are.
And I think from an analytical standpoint, maybe this is part of the point that you're making, something that we've wanted to do for a while, but it's just a matter of sitting down and spending the time to do it, is an analysis that gives us an average cost per mile per lane mile, really, of road maintenance. So that we have a figure that passes the smell test to say, when we accept in 3-4 years, the subdivision roads back here, it's X number of lane miles, and we anticipate that cost based on our lane mile cost that covers equipment, personnel, everything, you know, all of our overhead. This is what that number would be. And using that as a metric to have incremental increases to the operating budget. So when we get to the point where we need to hire another driver or buy another piece of equipment, we're anticipating that farther out because we've built up to it.
Now, is there a way that you could create new subdevelopments, much like Tiffwood, which says that the people coming in there or the developer who's putting in that development, you know, is going to cause an additional incremental cost to town, which should be really focused within that area and not shared by the town as a whole.
The best way to do something like that would be through impact fees. Transportation infrastructure impact fees are very different than the middle school bond impact fee. That was a very specific cause and effect. So the town looked at doing an impact fee, and Peter, you might remember this, but the town looked at doing an impact fee on Scruton Pond Road. So Scruton Pond Road historically was a gravel road, unimproved in the middle section. And it was through developments that road was improved and ultimately taken over by the town. The town, as I understand it, wanted to implement impact fees. So when those subdivisions popped up, those people contributed a proportional share, saying that this is going to have an impact on what we had. My understanding is that money couldn't be spent the way that you wanted it to because of how the impact fee as a funding mechanism is structured. Like it couldn't be spent for plowing or paving or line striping. Do you have any additional?
I don't recall.
So I'll sharpen my pencil on that. The planning board is who recommends the institution of impact fees. So that would be within their jurisdiction. They have asked, as you will see in the land use budget, for money that allows them to do impact fee studies, which is a necessary precursor. You have to have data that supports the cause and effect of new housing units on a category of cost. And so we can, you'll also remember, we talked about that in the design money warrant article for the public safety building, including money to fund an impact fee study, which would be much easier than road infrastructure. But hey, a portion of this facility improvement is caused by new housing units. Those new housing units should pay $3,000 towards this building every time they pop up until it's paid off, kind of thing. So planning board is looking at it.
So is that a recommendation from the ABC?
So I'm just trying to get some information so that we can discuss
Okay.
that as a potential recommendation. I wouldn't ask to do.
Yeah, I think the impact fees should all be proportional to the amount of traffic that they add to, for those divisions or businesses that are added to the town and that they're gonna go and impose on it.
Well, there's two benefits that I see from what putting together this, per mileage impact on the services that we provide. And that is one, for us to plan or potentially develop a non-lapsing reserve to fund new vehicles, new staff in order to accommodate growth. Given that is planned in over the horizon and we now have a capital improvement program that we want to discuss too at some point that has a lot of these potential future expenditures that the town's going to be responsible for. And how are we going to make sure that doesn't hit us all at once? Like,
Right.
Because we have a very good process going. So we need to, I think, expand that process to look at these kinds of issues as well.
But what I heard is that's just something that concerns me, Mark. Is the growth going beyond our ability to service them? So you've got older trucks. It seems like there's a long lead time to get new trucks. If you just look at the next year or two, are we already falling behind in our ability to maintain the existing roads?
If we get 3 more subdivisions, which you gotta remember now, let's back up a little. We already inherited one in the middle of last winter that we weren't coming on with overload. Nobody ever thought that would happen, but we got it. So it's just these little piecemeal things. And there's other things like, the parking lot that we put in down at Elfmaid that we're responsible for taking care of now. It's little drops in the bucket here and there, but they all add up. In answer to your question, we are flirting at this point with what we have. We're flirting with having trouble taking care of it. From a snow removal standpoint, it gets really scary because we have private contractors that are in the mix. 4 of them. They're all getting old, cranky, and tired, and they don't want to work all night anymore. And they're just plain sick of it. And their time is their twilight. And when we lose them, then it gets serious right away.
And there's no young person that wants to do this.
Nobody wants to spend the money to put a truck together to come out here and play around all night. Those guys are gone.
You'll hear it in the news, the state DOT is at, DEFCON whatever, because they're in tough shape. The select board, to their credit, Mark brought them a proposal earlier this year to increase the rates for the winter contractors in order to retain the people that we have, in part also because of our additional insurance requirements with the new contract we put them on. And the select board looked at the proposal and increased above what Mark was recommending.
Yeah.
And the comment that the select board made that stuck with me is, what are we doing for our residents if we aren't doing everything we can so that they have safe roads? And, I think that's an identity that people from Barrington have, is Barrington has good roads, especially in the winter. And that,
Well, how does what we pay them, what the costs are, compared to what some of these private guys that go around and do people's driving?
It's a whole different realm. You can't really even compare them. It's a completely different piece of equipment entirely. The artillery is a lot heavier than the out here work.
what we compare to is the state contractors and other municipal contractors. And there's a strong pool of data, and we're probably in the 80th percentile with the rates that the select board approved earlier.
We've gotten to the point where we're quite generous. We consider all the factors, and it's still, I was only able to attract one this year.
And we were able to keep.
We kept what we had.
Yeah.
So the contractor has to provide all his own equipment then?
Yes.
But you predict that it's gonna slowly go away in terms of, so is part of your warrant article addressing that? Because my reading was not really.
No.
Well, the capital reserve will address it.
Which one?
300,000.
Highway heavy equipment.
Yes.
But you mentioned, and is that the one you mentioned, said that it was gonna be for equipment to deal with new development?
Yes.
But that was on our list already, and I'm just wondering, what I'm hearing from you is that we may need to accelerate that even more. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year, something coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we really have the full picture of the impact and financial impact of what we need to do within the warrant article.
You've got the full picture as far as the equipment is concerned. But we're gonna have to hire somebody to put in that seat.
So we'll have enough equipment.
Should have enough equipment with the, so did you brief them on what we had talked about 300?
I'm gonna pull it up.
So basically what I'm requesting is 300,000 a year for the heavy equipment capital reserve. And then at that point, that will fill the gap that we have right now. As far as buying more equipment, but it did not address the personnel to run it, because we will have to hire an additional person for every new truck we get.
And so that conversation is, not dissimilar to what we talked about in public safety, right? We can offer all the money in the world, but if there isn't somebody to do that job, that's the biggest challenge. So what we anticipate is, as through attrition, we will lose contractors and they won't be replaced by contractors, and we will likely need to absorb more of that scope in-house. And we might be okay from an equipment standpoint, but we don't know where we're going to be in a workforce standpoint, from a workforce standpoint. And that's obviously one of the more difficult pieces to prepare for, because luckily it'll be a couple of years, but we don't know. So what Mark was talking about is we put together these funding schedules to accompany the capital improvements program that aim to take each one of those. So we're looking at highway heavy equipment right now, that aim to look at each one of those expenditures that we have on the approved CIP and the balance, the available balance that we have, and what we need to make as a schedule of contributions to cover those costs. And so what we have, and I don't know if you put this in your narrative, Mark, but what we're proposing is that the contribution be increased to 300,000 for the next 3 years. At which point that gets us over the hump and can be reduced down to 150,000 as a more regular contribution. And that will fund all of our projects out through 2040. And so, to your question about do we need to do more now to get to where we need to be? Yes, and that's what we're proposing.
But that was proposed last year, maybe even the year before, right? This isn't.
Last year was 200,000.
Last year was 200.
Now, speaking of, is that part of the capital improvement program, but we can't read when you send out the?
So, admittedly, we being mostly me, need to figure out a better way to bridge the gap between the funding commitments the select board make for the CIP and the actual CIP document, which is like a planning board document, a planning document. What we did at the meeting on October 2nd is the select board reviewed the CIP and we presented them with the funding proposal, how to fund those projects. And they adopted that funding plan, which included these schedules for the capital reserves that take and say, these are our known expenditures. This is what we need to contribute in order to fund those expenditures. And we'll update this every year as our cost projections for these pieces of equipment change and, you know, whether articles pass or fail change. So, or whether they pass or fail. So, yeah, I mean, maybe the funding plan is in a better format in an addendum to the CIP once it's adopted by the select board. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Like, it'd be good to see that.
Well, I think I would request that be shared as well as the spreadsheets that were part of the capital improvement program that were in there in Adobe you can't read, so they won't print out. But if they can share
the
those
Excel
with
version.
Excel versions.
The other thing though is it would be nice to actually have input into this as an ABC into that whole capital
Definitely.
improvement plan.
You know, and I think that's one of the things.
We'll talk
I'm
about- okay.
getting ahead of myself a little bit. But we'll agree to, when we're not scheduled to discuss just
Okay.
exactly that and be able to put our heads together as to what would help us and how we could get involved in that, because I believe it's critical. Since you're gonna come to us, because it's all of a sudden, so more requests for funding, that comes to us. So we'd like to be able to be part of the process that says, let's project what that's gonna be, so we can get ahead of it too.
So just so you can appreciate the enormity of the problem, a fully rigged six-wheel plow truck now. And every additional, so we've been recycling the sanders in these trucks for years. There's
So
20,
description where you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, so we're gonna reach a point where we can't do it. And every new one going forward is gonna need its own new sander to go with it. When you start doing that, those trucks are gonna be well north of $200,000 a piece and an 18 months turnaround time to get them from the time you order them. With the possibility that the price could go up in between the time you order it and the time you get it.
You should see these contracts now. You know, it used to be like a force majeure clause that says like, oh, you know, things might go crazy, the world might burn down. Now that's just like a standard clause, like, yeah, we reserve the right to tack on however much money it takes us to still make money off you on this. And it's crazy.
Nothing you can do.
No,
We paid $15,000 more for the last plow truck that we took in.
escalation.
And their basic comment was, hey, take it or leave it, we'll sell it to somebody.
Yeah.
Now, those are larger than what the contractors use in their season work for us.
No, same,
Same,
same animal, give or take, yeah.
We buy any of them from the contractor, buy them out in the seats.
Yeah, they got what they want.
Then you're
You know,
like
like-
buying somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
You know,
But to that point, I think that there's an intermediate model at some point in the future where the town leases the equipment and carries the burden of insurance on the equipment and hires the operator as a seasonal part-time employee. And then only leases it for the winter season. I haven't fleshed out the idea fully, but I think that as our insurance requirements, in order to protect the town's interest, continue to increase that, so to increase their cost. And I think it would cost, in net, it would cost less if we leased the equipment from them, insured it ourselves, and hired them as a seasonal employee to do that role for us. It would be less risk for them. There's problems with it that I haven't been ironed out, but it is a good point.
If this was 20 years ago, back when private contractors were more plentiful, to take on any additional subdivisions would be a no-brainer for me if that was the situation that I was in, because I'd just say, hey, we'll just hire another contractor or two, pay them, send them home when they're done, we're done with them. We don't have that luxury.
Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, and it relates to the winter contract persons. Is it still true that we pay for the edge on their plows?
Correct.
All right, and we pay for the diesel?
We paid the difference from $2.50 when we started the
Fuel escalation. Fuel escalation.
fuel escalation. Yeah, so anything over $2.50, which is where fuel was when we started the fuel escalation program. Anything over $2.50 a gallon we cover.
Okay, so are those costs in the winter contractor line or are
Yes.
they in our fuel and maintenance line?
The cost for the fuel allowance is in the winter contractors line. The cutting edges are in the winter parts. Basically. Yeah.
But they don't fuel up at the town shed.
No,
They fuel up on their own. We just cover the difference in cost, assuming that the contract was signed. They agreed to a rate when fuel prices were a certain price, and this escalation covers the variability. And it goes the other way too. I love to live in a world where the diesel prices went below $2.50. But that it goes both ways.
What do you mean both ways?
So
So if it became $1,
Yeah.
they would be paying us more? Or?
we would be paying them less.
Yeah.
So do we know that they're not using gas except for us? How do we ensure that?
They don't use our fuel.
it's not our fuel.
But they can, they're.
Oh, it's a good point. So what we do is there's a industry standard gallons per hour of utilization,
Gotcha.
and that's what we use as the metric
Yep.
for the fuel allowance.
It mimics the same exact formula that the state of New Hampshire uses. They've got the same program.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Questions on?
On your highway vehicle maintenance, and sending equipment out for periodic maintenance or doing it yourself, I understand in-house did not work well.
In-house is not working the way I want it to, and we've lost some expertise with some people that retired that really knew how to take care of their own truck. We don't have quite as much of that now.
Would it be more economical to go strictly send out for PM, or would it be better to hire a mechanic?
Funny you should say that. We need a
Like where your head's at.
We need a mechanic desperately.
And the select board have authorized the hiring of the position. The trouble is finding the unicorn.
Yeah.
We have a vacancy in the highway department, and we advertised both a mechanic and a truck driver, labor, equipment operator to see what the candidate pool exists. Admittedly, I'd been out with a baby. We can share an update on what the candidate pool
No
looks like.
bites on the mechanic.
Yeah. Not a huge surprise. So we've been trying, if you know anybody.
Yeah.
The city of Dover does it well. The city of,
They have that whole
Yeah.
shop up there.
and
Sam used to run.
oh, okay. So they take, and they'll take work from other communities. The scale of Dover and their equipment is well suited for that approach. Mark has an excellent plan for kind of a junior version of that in Barrington, where we would even have that person do the cruisers and the fire engines and do a lot of work. But it's difficult to find a person to do. That's gonna be a one-man shop.
You need to find that person that will, I compare our garage full of equipment, it's like a stable full of horses. It's constant care, constant doting every single day. The details, which a lot of them are just getting missed now.
Is there a way to almost centralize this maintenance with the police, with the fire? And have somebody, maybe in town, somebody in the town actually take on all of that as a.
That's what we want to do.
That's kind of what we want to do.
Drag Phil Moody out of retirement.
And that's what.
Yes. Hiring somebody, right? I'm saying, is there outsource it because it's easier, let somebody else deal with the hiring, the benefits, all of that. So I'm saying outsource it all.
So that's what we're doing right now. I mean, we send most of it out right now. The challenge is, some of the challenges are with the bigger pieces of equipment. 3 shops in a 50-mile radius have closed in the last few years that limit our ability to send the bigger equipment. So we can't centralize it to one place because it's easier for us to take Mark's pickup and Rick's pickup and the cruisers to New Knights than to wait for one of the bigger shops, just based on a turnaround time.
Yeah, did have we approached Capital Truck? Did a land deal with them.
Allegiant, it's Allegiant now.
They're a little sensitive.
We asked them.
They're a little sensitive right now because we haven't bought our last 2 trucks from them.
Well, yeah, it's a dynamic situation. The fire department had some pretty egregious maintenance mistakes made at that facility, and submitted a letter to the select board saying that we're not gonna be having maintenance done here. And that they're having the same problem we are.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine people, right. And, you know, what we had in Mark is Mark, after spending 40 years running a paving business, spent 10 years or just shy of it running a maintenance shop for Rochester Truck. And so Mark knows truck maintenance. And if we were able to hire a mechanic to do it in-house, this person would be under excellent supervision to really be able to do it well in Barrington. We were close. The last time we advertised it, we had somebody, and this candidate's concern was being the only person, right? And that's why I think Dover has it well suited, because it's no one person's responsibility. That responsibility is shared. There's somebody else, to kind of take the workload. And yeah, so it's a challenge.
So why not team up with another municipality of some sort and have a sort of a collaborative agreement?
And we've tried to do that. So when we had the mechanic position originally created, Mark had talked to other communities with the idea that if we were able to get our feet under us and this person's sole responsibility was maintenance, probably they'd have capacity other than us. And we would do the same thing that Dover does in, farm out the maintenance work. And so I think it would have to get bigger than what we talked about it previously in order to have like a Dover scale of a shop. And maybe Barrington would be well suited to it. We've got a decent garage that's
Yeah.
heated.
I mean, you need to buy some equipment to go along with this idea.
Yep. Yeah, and then the keystone of that plan is personnel.
Well, do a maintenance co-op with the communities around it.
But if
Sounds like we could make a killing on this if we took the lead, right?
If Allegiant and Rochester Truck and Allen, if they can't find mechanics in the private sector, I fear our ability.
And incidentally, with the demise of all the shops in the area, up goes the hourly rate at all the shops that are left, and they're charging top dollar for somebody that really ain't worth it, that's all they have to work.
So what happens to the people who were working at these shops that closed, like, in Summersville?
A lot of them are gone.
Right.
It's changing of the guard right now out here. A lot of us that are going away.
What? Gary wasn't very old. Where is he located?
The baby boomers are aging out.
Did somebody say you were allowed to go away? I didn't hear that.
Yeah. This social security keeps doing these cost of living increases, making social security look better and better, What happened to Bush getting rid of the social security?
I mean, it's like a lot of the talent was in the last generation, and that last generation is going away.
Then one other item, knotweed remediation is in the highway paved roads line item. Housekeeping suggestion, maybe we ought to break that out just to show what we're spending on knotweed mitigation, remediation. I just don't think it belongs in with the highway paved roads line. It just seems,
Yeah.
if you want to know how much money we're spending on that, why would you think to look at the highway paved roads? So I don't know if that's something we can just pop out.
Where do we put street trimming?
Not easy to do.
mowing, it used to be the mowing contract line, but it's basically, it's just tree trimming comes out of that.
Well, I'm just wondering, talking about weeds, it's really comparable to tree trimming. It should that become its own.
Let me ask you this, Mark. If we continue with the success we've been having, how long before that knotweed mitigation program will cease to exist? My understanding was a couple of years.
Couple more years, we should have it.
So it's really not going to be an ongoing thing.
Not to say that it won't pop up in another 5 years after that.
Bittersweet.
Yeah. All of it.
It's very.
Okay.
All right, I have one more. The Department of Bridge Culvert Capital Reserve. I talked about multiple sites. Is it possible to put together a spreadsheet that projects what those things, what that potential that we're looking at is, even if it's a probability?
Yeah, that's in the
of
CIP.
15%, it is?
Yeah, that's in, all those projects are in the CIP.
Well, then maybe when you spread that, gives that.
Yeah, I have, I'll get you the Excel version.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
but the CIP has like $9 million for
That's small.
culverts, right? And when I look at the culvert and the Swains Lane Dam, it's all just, I don't know what the time frame that we have when it says amount of total cost of the item, but it seems like we should maybe be putting it down more accurately for some period of time. I don't know how we do it.
I'd love to be able to see that, because the CIP, to me, that's what I was able to look at. Did not have year by year, it had sort of totals if you took all the things in there.
Exactly.
And so it didn't really break it out in terms of time frame, because that's.
Yeah, that spreadsheet's there.
Within 6 years.
Yeah, I'll get you covered. So here's the challenge. I would love that, just like we showed you for the heavy equipment capital reserve, I would love to show you a schedule where that says we'll contribute this much money over this many years and we'll have the money to do it that way. The challenge is it is not even close to politically feasible, because we need $6 million just to do the causeway culverts on Young Road. What is part of the funding plan, what the select board on October 2nd conceptually agreed to was the idea of having a $10 million infrastructure bond initiative that pulled those CIP projects in various geographic areas, right? So there's some people that never drive on Young Road, there's some people that never drive on Toland Road, there's some people that never drive on, it's another one we had on there, Deer Ridge. So what, the school board doesn't feed you?
No, they don't.
One's worse than the other.
I leave at 4:30 and don't come home till 9.
Thanks, Danny. So that's the select board's conceptual plan, is a $10 million infrastructure warrant article for 2026 that addresses those infrastructure projects, get them off the table. The subtext of asking for a 300,000 contribution to the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve is, one, to pay for the engineering, so those projects are shovel ready, and making them shovel ready allows us to position ourselves in a more advantageous spot to pursue funding sources, which there's no money for a culvert, none.
All right, and I think that's a good.
And that's true at the dam, because I think I saw that it was going to be more than we were asking for.
The dam, we actually have as part of the funding plan, to pay for that out of the capital reserve. And the way that we did that was we split out, as part of the select board's funding plan, we split out the riprap filter and the gate repairs into 2 separate years. And forget if I put that on the spreadsheet or not, Mark, or Jim. But in that October 2nd meeting, I'll pull that up. How much, I think we were saying equal appropriations for the next 3 years and,
Yeah.
yeah. So let me pull up October 2nd.
So the two phases of construction would probably conflict with one another as far as ergonomics of
Doing it at the same
doing
time.
it at the same time. So rather than having be in each other's way, it's better just to do the gate repair first, which I think is more important than the safety factor. And then worry about the riprap filter later on, by then we'll have another chunk of money to throw at it.
So this is the town administrator report from that October 2nd meeting. And so what happened at that meeting is we had the CIP presentation, which this was when it was still like in its final draft phase before it was fully adopted by the planning board. And so that was all presented and that's the scope of the planning board for the most part, but the select board gave input. The select board's scope was the funding sources. And so what staff did is we prepared these items as a, hey, following this roadmap, we will fund all of most of the CIP projects through 2034. The ones that aren't funded are some of the rec projects, which they're pursuing other funding sources for. So they're on the CIP, but they don't have funding for it. So if you look at the first one, if we increase the dam engineering to $200,000 for 2024 and 2025, that will fund both of the projects. The select board made a change in the priorities by moving the riprap filter from 2024 to 2025, so that we do the gate repairs in 24, we do the riprap filter in 25, and we've raised the money to do that in the capital reserve. And we have 200,000 this year, 200,000 next year.
So does the total on the warrant article have those two numbers together? And then saying we're asking for whatever it is, $200,000 this year?
The warrant article would just say to add $200,000 to the dam repair engineering capital reserve.
What does it say is the total cost?
On the request,
Yeah.
on that request form,
Yeah.
I don't. Do you have it?
But I don't know, but I'm just asking, is that what we would do? Because I was looking at the total cost and I just couldn't figure out sometimes where it came from or how they got to it.
Mhm.
And this is one of those ones I think especially if you know it's defined, shouldn't it be upfront on that? Was my thought. Maybe it's all academic. I don't know.
I don't know if it's easy to put that in the warrant article because of the legal requirements of phrasing a warrant article. So you're like saying, we have a $800,000 project, we have $500,000 in a capital reserve already, we need $200,000 this year. I think that's something that would be in the voter guide, maybe not in the warrant article.
Sure. But even in the warrant request form,
Yeah.
I would think it would be something that would be,
Yeah.
because it gives you a lot more information, just that sentence that you gave me,
Mhm.
gave me a lot more information how we're doing. And yes, I guess we should all go back and read all that, but it's hard to.
I understand that. I think that as we have relied more heavily on the CIP and invested in the CIP document, we have spent less time and energy on those warrant article pages, one sheets.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that we need to reconcile. So it's not leaving
Yeah.
you needing or wanting more information.
Communication is critical. Now, when I look at all these projects that we're looking at, is it possible to look at how many of those would have been included in two?
None of them.
None.
There's a recreation program on the CIP that talks about recreational opportunities in the town center.
All right. Any other questions from Mark?
This is just a matter, maybe I'm just confused, I'm old. On the warrant article for 150,000, it's talking about a highway paving capital reserve. It isn't really a capital reserve,
No.
it's a non-lapsing.
Non-lapsing,
So that's just not labeled right.
correct. Apologies.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
We're good.
Keep up the good work.
Yes.
Thank you for the bloomers, helping them with their.
Oh, yeah.
garden.
Yeah.
Glad that you helped them. Very much appreciated.
Yeah.
It's a personal moment too, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks. Okay. Now let's move on to transfer station.
That's pretty good for 5:30.
All right. You able to hear us okay, Aaron?
I can. Hello. Hello.
Good. Welcome. Your turn. In the hot seat, I guess we can call it. Here's is a fairly straightforward with a few questions, of course. And I'll open up for the members here to ask questions on your operating budget, so you don't have to just go through it. It's fairly straightforward. All right, I'll ask one. You talk about electronics decrease in terms of the cost of the electronics processing. Is that due to volume changes or?
No,
is that-
the volume changes are the same. Lou has been really good with being able to maximize what we're doing. There are some things that he's able to take apart, which now will go into metal, so we aren't charged like a miscellaneous fee. And that reduced him maximizing our load, so to speak, which is that whole container, and having to call and have it offloaded has reduced, really what we're doing for them. And then hopefully we're looking at doing some other changes which might reduce it significantly. The next conversation for the transfer station review committee meeting will be having Freon removal for some of our refrigerators, because they take up a lot of space in our container. And then if it's okay with Harding, we can put that into metal.
All right, now, as you do that, and is the committee looking at the pricing for the various electronic components that are charged to the residents? So if I bring a printer, that's going to be, well, you can't salvage much from that. If I bring a monitor, they can't salvage much from that. But if I bring a PC, desktop, you could salvage some of that, and the price of that would be less. Is that taken into consideration when you develop your price list?
It is. It's basically like I can say, refrigerators cost us $15 to dispose of through our electronics company. We charge $17. Like there isn't much of, an increase right now for those fees. We are able to cut cords. There's other components that for some of the material that isn't as painstakingly to take apart. And those are considered commodities. So like a Gaylord of wire for us could be potentially $200 off of our bill, so to speak. But I mean, again, that takes a couple months to fill up. We will be getting better with doing a yearly review on our pricing, just to make sure that we are keeping up. I know for our metal and the electronics, it's really been like the transportation fees that have gone up. And I think that's been across the board for a lot of things.
Yeah, anything that they can extract copper from that, they love that.
Well, I have an old smoker, electrical smoker that stood out, so I can. So you basically are saying that the committee does look at read those prices, and so that we can not, absorb the cost within the town, but rather recover them through the prices we charge for those.
I'm sorry, it kind of cut out when what you were saying.
Well, I'm looking to make sure that we're not trying, where we can actually charge a fair price for the person that bringing in the equipment that to be disposed of, that we don't pass what we have, what we don't undercharge, so that the townspeople in general have to pick up the slack.
No, and again, that's the going forward, we've been keeping an eye on what we're bringing in versus what we're being charged for per se, you know what I mean, to make sure that we are on track. I know it's been a couple, I mean, we just did an update for the fees 2021. And I know that the conversation that we've had with Connor and stuff is to make sure that we are doing a yearly review on those items. So we're doing okay right now. We're not overcharging and we're not undercharging, if that answers your question right now.
All right, that's fine. Any other questions on the operating budget? All right, let's move on to your warrant article request. We've been brought up, I think we've discussed some needs within the transfer station for reconfiguring and the traffic pattern, a whole bunch of other things in terms of the workflow. But when I look at what is here for the warrant article request, and of course, it's not the total description that we'll have, it really is kind of a pig in a poke from my perspective. We like to see more detail when it comes to asking and requesting funding. And I don't have a description of what configuration, the plans, potential timeframes of what you hope to accomplish. And I think that would be very useful for us.
Okay, that's something we can do. Right now, we're in the process of getting the feasibility study going. So I don't have much of an update, but I can absolutely have that. I can reach out to CMA to see where we're at, so I can at least note that, you know, we have started the process on what we're looking for. And then, you know, we can add more detail.
And that's potential. It's a potential projects and so on.
Yes.
You know, broad gauge estimates and ranges of what each might be and what the time frame in terms of need you're projecting. Be very useful for us. Any other questions for Aaron? Very good. Appreciate your sticking with us.
Couple items on transfer station.
Yeah.
Relative to fees and relative to the future. So on zooming out really far, really quick, we have a contract with Waste Management that expires at the end of 2026. And we have limited plans starting January 1st, 2027. Waste Management asked for a cost escalation above and beyond our contract. The select board, in their savvy approach, countered with, let's extend our contract and build in increased fees as part of that. Waste Management came back with an astronomical cost increase as part of that renegotiation. And the select board said, no, we have a sweetheart deal with the contract we have now. There's nothing you can do about it. And so we're going to ride this out. And the subtext of that was that we're not going to sit on our hands and do nothing about what we anticipate happening in 2027. And what we anticipate happening in 2027 is our costs skyrocketing. We're talking maybe tripling what our costs are now then. And those costs are across the board. Our transportation costs, our tonnage costs, our recycling costs. We're not under contract for all of those, but that is an opportunity and we anticipate seeing those costs go through the roof. So Aaron and I and others, we have brainstormed possibilities to prepare for that inevitability and not have a year in 2027 where we need to have a 300% increase in the operating budget or a 300% increase in user fees to the patrons of the transfer station. And so what we have collectively come up with is an idea we presented to the select board in August of this year, that we would establish what's called a special revenue fund, similar to a revolving fund, but it's a separate mechanism. We would establish a special revenue fund and divert a portion of the revenue from the transfer station into that fund as a savings account. We would set a benchmark. So this year we have about $220,000 budgeted from the transfer station fees that's offset the taxes. So we would freeze that number. Say it's 200 or 220,000. for the next 5 years. But we would gradually, on an annual basis, increase the fees of the transfer station, maybe 10 or 15% a year, so that we're not having a huge jump in prices like the first time we increased bag prices since 1987. And everybody, we thought everybody was gonna be crazy because we increased the bag prices 33%. With the exception of a sign that they have at Pet Connection that says, "Don't blame us, blame the town." Nobody really said anything about it, But having a plan to increase the fees, an average of 10 or 15% every year, which would result in a growing amount of revenue, which we would divert to the special revenue fund, which would allow us, when our fees increase 2 or 3-fold in 2027, we would have an account where we can buy down that increase. So we don't have to increase the operating budget dramatically, increase the user fees dramatically in that 1 year.
So would that need to reflect additional taxes?
That'd be my question.
That's why we're freezing the 220,000 in revenue, so that amount would go unchanged. But we're increasing the fees, but we're not realizing the increased revenue from the increased fees in those years. We're building that as a savings account, and we're maintaining a level funded amount of transfer station revenue through all of those years at 220,000, whatever it is.
Then I would hope that we would see any increase in the operating budget of being built in, like a percentage increase to that frozen
To the
fee,
frozen amount?
so that you aren't impacting taxes.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What I was just going to look at is where we are this year as far as revenue collection in the transfer station versus the operating budget costs. I'm just going to look quick numbers here. We've collected 175 and 55, 100 and 230,000. We've collected $230,000 in revenue as of November 7th. If somebody has a transfer station open, what was the operating budget of the transfer station for the 2 categories? If you look at the first half of this, this number right here, 377,000. So 230 over 377, 61%. You're good. And we still have 2 months to go. So we're reasonably going to be 70% or more funded by user fees, where just 3 years ago, we were 50%. And so the user fee increase in 2021 did a lot for how much of the burden of the transfer station is funded through taxes. I bring that up only to say I really want the committee, the transfer station committee, to pick a number. 50%, 75%, 100%. I don't care what the number is, but pick a target that helps us all set fees to meet that target, right? So in 3 years, we have gone from 50% funded through revenue to 70 or more % funded through revenue. That's good if that's what we wanted to do. I think that's what we should want to do. But what's our target, right? If we slip back to 60 next year, should we increase our fees to get back up to 70? Or the fact that we're at 70, should we leave our fees level funded until we get back to 50 and then go back up?
Can I ask a question? So do we want to, like, Connor, and I don't know if this is, I know we kind of had touched on it, like, are we looking to cover the whole cost of the transfer station budget or just disposal? Like, are we aiming to go, and that's the question?
That's the question for the transfer station committee. Right now, rough numbers through November 7th were 61%. Last year, you did the numbers, we were like 78%.
I don't remember exactly, but it was over 70.
It was over 70. And like I said, 3 years ago, the first year I did the analysis, we were 50%. Now, if you do a sampling of communities across the state, the most that I saw was 15% funded through revenue. Barrington is an anomaly, having so much of the transfer station operations funded through revenue. I don't think that's a bad thing. In my opinion, if Steve Saunders wants to pay for trash pickup, I should be able to look him in the eyes and tell him, your taxes aren't going to your neighbor's transfer station utilization. Their user fees are paying for that. It's an a la carte. You choose your services. We can't do that a lot in municipal work. The transfer station is a place we can do it. Why don't we?
And doing that will drive people off to these private people who,
And now it's their problem.
yeah. Because then it's less for us.
Connor, we're not an anomaly. We are the example.
Right? Seriously. No, but I honestly, and like I said, I don't know. If I were king for a day, I might target, I might target 100%.
Yeah.
And bring user fees to the point where 100% of the overhead of that facility is funded through user fees. And that's the metric that we use on an annual basis to evaluate user fees and any changes we need to make to them.
Well,
Becomes much of a direct center at that point.
I'm not sure I would go that far, but.
Right, and that's, I mean,
So,
it's
but
good
the
enough.
question is, how do you determine what that level should be? And I look at, okay, if I were to look at what the transfer station is doing, disposing of trash so that people don't bury it in their backyard.
Mhm.
You know, some of those things really could be identified as town should absorb some of the responsibility for doing that.
Proportion.
So
Maybe a joint meeting between the ABC and the Transfer Station Recycling Center Committee on the task of identifying that portion to be funded by revenues and on the task of this special revenue fund per RSA 30.
I like that concept.
Okay.
For funding that future.
Just to warn you, part of the committee is really gung ho on getting curbside pickup of recycling, which we've looked at before, and it was over $1 million then. I can't imagine what it would be now. But we'd still have to maintain the transfer station for things that aren't going to happen, like the bulky waste and those sorts of things. So just to forewarn you, there's sincere discussion that we really ought to have curbside pickup.
How
I
many?
can tell you, as a matter of fact, I'm not among
Neither am I.
Yes, I mean.
Wait, really? I was gonna ask you to name names.
Totally directed at you.
Town here that.
And she's not alone. That's the worst part.
Now I'm beginning to put it all together.
Well, yeah, and I think there's, you know, when you look at it, there are certain categories of residents that cannot afford to get to them. And so they need some sort of pickup services.
You know, I
And
was,
that's,
Private department can do it.
And that's why they hire these guys with, you know, 1.5 pickups and stuff like that, all stuff.
well, when my pickup rusted out, I did a cost benefit and said it's better for me to pay for pickup services than for trash and recyclables. So, but that was an individual decision.
But I like your idea about the joint meeting. I think that would.
I think that would be very good.
Because there's at least a few people in that committee who think incurring that cost is
Everybody
a
else
wonderful
think
idea.
it's a good idea to get together with them.
So let's try to do that within the next few weeks, right? I don't think that we can do it in place of one of our budget committee meetings.
No, and I want to use the next spare meeting for
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
subjects, but
Do you have a meeting on the books, Aaron?
No, not currently, because we had just tried to finalize everything with the feasibility study, and there really wasn't anything to report back till after kind of the budgets and stuff like that. But we can, I mean, I don't know what days work for the advisory budget committee, but we can definitely work something out to start the process and the
We'll send out
discussion.
this homework, the video and the materials for the August 10th select board meeting. The link to where this discussion starts on that special revenue fund. So everybody kind of comes in a level playing field. And we don't have a meeting
next week.
next week. That's probably too early.
No, for this. it is.
Yeah.
We don't, I don't think, I'd like to look, because I think this is really necessary in preparation for what the final amount and what the configuration of the the request is going to be for the fund, so, which we have time.
What are other municipalities paying for waste management stuff?
A
Much
lot
more.
more, a lot more.
Okay, so that tripling in 2027 is not out of the ordinary.
No, it's a correction.
Is waste management the only game in town for? Or
So here's the thing, there's two major components of disposal fees, transportation and tonnage. Tonnage, we might get a as good or a better deal somewhere else. We'll never get a better transportation deal than waste management because they're right next door. And the town of Durham, they do their own haul. So they
So does
bought
Lee.
trucks with multiple.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So between now and 2027, depending on the special revenue fund, maybe you want to say, okay, we'll pay their new tonnage, but we'll haul ourselves. It's better for us to buy equipment and haul ourselves. And we could use the special revenue fund for that. It gives us some of that flexibility.
And again, cost doesn't even the place.
186,000 for a roll-off truck.
There you go. That's scary. One of those cans. But 187,000, we pay that in tipping fees in 1 year.
Yeah,
Two-
and then you gotta
one and a half
maintain it,
years.
you gotta hire someone to drive it, and.
Well, at least you don't have to hire them to drive in the middle of the
I mean,
night.
unless the town administrator will pick up a shift once a week to
Hey, listen,
drive.
I'm looking for additional duties and responsibilities, so please, by all means.
Extra college fund.
So Aaron, just a charge question, I guess. Are we breaking even on recycling? Because I'm like, I didn't talk to my wife on that.
Don't.
I'm like, why are we recycling? So let me ask you one question. What percentage of the waste that goes into recycling actually gets recycled?
Peter, do you remember? I don't remember off the top of my head. I mean, obviously, I would say the majority of our stuff, because what we are taking in is only what waste management wants. We're not taking in anything that they cannot recycle at this point.
But I'd like to have somebody follow a can of our recycling through to when it's actually recycled. Like it's actually
Yeah.
turns into something else,
Right.
because I suspect that
Very
the
little of it.
very little, yeah.
The plastic
It's-
and all that is.
It's big pharma. This is big green arrows, right? Like that's the, everybody's read the exposés. But yeah, we pay more on a month-to-month basis to recycle our recycled goods than we pay to dispose of our municipal solid waste.
Just end it then.
I suspect
Other communities did.
What
A lot of
waste
communities.
management does with it either.
Why recycle wrong? And Farmington's probably the closest.
Newmarket,
Oh, Newmarket did away with recycling?
quite a while ago.
Oh, they seem way,
Crunchy.
well, yeah, yeah. You said it. I'm surprised about that.
It's an
Newmarket.
interesting discussion, right? Because you gotta believe plastic generally isn't recycled, right? Maybe the cans, but if you think about just the cost of recycling, then you add in, I imagine we have a lot of personnel costs, right? Just for managing the recycling, right? So if you look at a total value or total cost for it, it's expensive.
But would it make sense then to like corrugated do we do well with that, or is that something to take separately? Would we do better and then get rid of everything else?
We've had those,
Okay.
See, I'm the new guy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, we haven't. The transfer station committee has. I'm pulling out corrugated. What do they call it?
The OCC, like,
Old corrugated cardboard.
yep. We've discussed different options for many different things.
Yep, we do that for the month of December and early
Yeah.
January.
Yep.
Well, I'll talk to my wife.
Talk about the ledge. I mean, that is,
But members of the committee have challenged Waste Management whether they're really recycling everything. They are absolutely adamant that they are. That
Themselves.
everything gets sorted and shipped to Massachusetts and sorted there.
I mean, if it makes you feel better, I saw the facility when I went on the NRA bus tour and we went to waste management. We did see the tipping floor where the recyclables go for us. And Pete LaChapelle was next to me. I know that he's, on the city council and everything else, but he explained everything, and he has generously offered to give us a tour of the facility down in Mass. So that is out there.
I'd do that.
It's in Bill Rickard.
Because I'm so curious, right? Because nothing supposedly gets recycled, so let's.
Here's what I suspect. You go down to that facility and then they process and it's
And send it
loaded
to
onto
somewhere
other
else.
trucks. And yeah, so we need to follow those trucks. Right? Yeah.
Somebody, this is a good movie for somebody.
There are documentaries. There are, oh yeah.
You're so cynical.
Yeah.
You're still doing the book.
So we are offering what we're considering waste diversion, and that's kind of the focus for, helping us reduce some of our tonnage for stuff. But we do have our book bin, we have a clothing bin. We're still doing the plastic film recycling, which has been taken on by some very gracious volunteers. And we also are doing the plastic cap with recycling program with Nathan Gray. The library did it, and they got a bench, I believe, out of it. He lives in Barrington. So we are making use of the stuff we cannot recycle that it is going into other programs.
Now, do you have a book repository, or do you have to take each book and stick it in the thing manually?
Well, the opening for the book bins is pretty big that you can do a few at a time. And honestly, residents take full advantage of that.
Well, I've got about 10 boxes that I'd like.
Bring them over.
Use it to fill the new library?
Aaron, I've got one other question, and this concerns the well monitoring for the capsule. Is there an estimated sunset date for when we will no longer need to be monitoring those?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head, and I can absolutely find that out, but I would Peter, do you have any idea from when they closed it?
We'll all be dead before that ever.
It's going to still be a long time. I can find out to see if they can give me an estimated date.
Are we looking at a multi-generational monitoring on this thing or what?
It's not a lot of money, but I think it's gonna last forever.
No, but it is something that's continuing cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe this is something that we own for a very long time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Mark's gonna be spreading poison all over Barrington. Do we need to mull over those around the transfer station?
That'll be next.
Don't even say.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate your openness in our discussion.
You're welcome.
And I'm gonna ask the ABC to sit here for a little bit longer, and we can say goodbye to you.
What's our bag price compared to like around? What's our bag price compared to like local other areas?
Well, again, because we're a drop off, it's a lot cheaper than what's Dover now, Aaron? $3.75.
Their bags.
Yeah.
They are $33. Last I checked, between $33 and $35 for a roll of 10. And we charge 17.
And anybody like on the borders buying Barrington bag and coming here?
We require stickers.
We initially had caught some people doing that because they can buy them at outside vendors like George Califf's Market Basket. But now we have asked residents to get stickers, and most of them are stickered. So we do know that the majority of the trash is being generated from Barrington residents.
Yeah, I guess that was my question is, the Poland Road area or something like that, you go to Market Basket, you get groceries, you buy your Barrington bags. Over the course of time, you can save some money by just driving over, dumping it off versus buying the Dover bags and having it picked up at your house.
Yeah.
The majority of the time, the transfer station attendants will, challenge isn't the right word, but they'll inquire like, why don't you have a sticker? And if they don't, they'll say, you know, like you need to get one. So they'll go to the window and fill an application and then not pick up their stickers for months. But, you know, we do have, we have been more consistent with that.
Well, thank you. Very much.
See you people later.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night.
Things will get better, Mark said, we just go back.
So much easier before I check and have them come to your driveway.
You still gotta get it out to the cover.
Yeah, a couple hundred feet to log. 8 miles.
5 minutes, drive over, drop it off.
It used to be good for me. Okay, the subject, I want to make it as quick as possible, but it's to ask if everybody could make next week a meeting. It's a subject that I want to talk about is that capital improvement plan, the other long-range planning documents, the master plan. They're not in sync. And future needs for the town in terms of being able to have a level off process. I think needs us to really figure out how we're going to tackle it. And I know that Scott has given some thoughts of this and as well as Connor. And I'd like to expand that and get the materials from the capital improvement plan, all master plan information in terms of what they have and the board has approved. Some chapters in there for land use and for other things that will have an impact on the town.
Sorry. No, you're done.
Go ahead.
Just gonna ask, can we also clarify what the role is of the ABC, I guess by statute and by desire? I mean, we were talking earlier about the Richardson's Dam. Is our role to talk about and decide how it will be disposed of or not, whether it be rebuilt? Is our role to talk about whether we should fund it?
I think
Whatever.
that's a good add to the discussion.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm adding on.
Yes, I agree. We can do that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if, you know,
So you get to come now, common understanding of how we should approach looking at anything. Whether it's operating budget, which is one thing, but all of the capital improvement issues and growth within that we have to accommodate and how those are accommodated in terms of finance. Chris can make it. But that who can't make it next week.
I think I should go with that.
Try to give you a week off. Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, we've learned out that it turns out that we have some bigger issues that we really need to address. All right, okay, so we're scheduled for next week then. Motion for tonight.
Here, really quick, I'm just, we can do this after we close, but if you want to take one, pass it down. This is a flow chart that the recreation department prepared.
Oh, yeah. I was hungry, though.
Yep, and then this is the tax rate document. So like I said, the tax rate was set. You can file the tax rate document in the tax rate section.
Look at it, I didn't get it. What felt like me on
Once I have the video, John, I presented to the select board last night. And so we'll have that recording, so you can watch 5-minute video to have it, you know, kind of like walk through, explain what exactly it does. So.
Then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Who is the second?
When our Christmas cards come out.
Hopefully they will be mailed on the 14th or 15th, and they'll be due the 18th of December.
30 days, right?
You said tax bill?
Christmas card.
Well, he said Christmas card.
Yeah, I get that question from my wife.
Yeah.
Amy, are you in tomorrow?
No.
We could sit down and figure out.
Yes, let's do that.
Do
I was
things
gonna do
together.
that, yeah,
Oh,
Is there a good time?
thankfully I wasn't here last week.
whenever. It's time, 15.
Is the meeting adjourned?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can shut that.